guarding Bryant. Artest looking, gets it to Bryant. Bryant dribbling, has to put it up with the buzzer. Banks it in! He banks in the three! And the Lakers win the game!
Boom, baby. What's going on, Insurance Syndicate members? Good morning, good morning, good morning. You're probably like, dang, where's Tony at? So it is just me here on the call today. I believe Tony is actually, I want to say he might already be commenting. He is flying to St. Louis for the Slahu event, I think is how you say that. So he's in the air. He is tuning in, though, but it'll be just me. Oh, there he is right there. What's going on, Mr. Merwin, Mr. England? We'll give just a couple seconds here to let people pop in. Miss Patrice, how are you? I need to catch up with you and ask how that conference was last week with Frisella and Milet. Put that in the comments. How was that? And real quick, too, y'all, before we get going, make sure and let StreamYard view your comments just so we can get you up on the screen, just like Mr. Merwin and Mr. Ryan and Patrice. Here he is, 30,000 feet. Chris, how are you, sir? Good morning. Good morning. Hey, super excited, y'all. And I guess I'll just get right into my weekly win. We are doing some really cool things on the life insurance side, and I'm not going to really kind of disclose too much of that, but we've got some really cool opportunities on the horizon, and so super excited for that. Guys, put real quick your weekly wins in, but we are finally getting some traction, and then so we've got a couple things that we're working on in that side of things. Shout out Tim and Julian there. They've got a really cool Facebook group. They're doing some cool leads for the life insurance side. So if you're looking for final expense or if you're looking for term, definitely check them out. I believe their group name is Insurance Agent Freedom. So yes, I will actually shout out another group because definitely go check them out. They've got a really cool multiple kind of tiers that you guys can look at. But if you're in the life side, you're looking for some leads, definitely go check them out. Also hit up Chase McAllister. So Chase is actually, you guys will see him here pretty soon on one of the shows. But he's got some really cool things that he's doing with just live transfers and getting vetted and having really just some top-notch individuals within his organization. So definitely hit them up if you're looking for some leads. Weekly win, son. Hey, let's go. I did see that. Congrats to Isaac. I'm not sure if he's on here, Ryan, but make sure and tell Isaac I said congratulations to him. That's awesome. Looked really cool. I love the backdrop, and I can't tell if it was a church or a school or what. So congrats to him. And so good morning, everybody. We've got an amazing show lined up. This is actually somebody I've just recently been able to kind of connect with and kind of learn a little bit about their story. And we're going to do a deep dive into really just the years and years of experience that he has within the life and health space, the financial side of things, and just kind of his come up from where he kind of started to where he is now and all the really cool things he's done in between. So I'm super excited. We've got an action-packed show for y'all. Again, it's just going to be me today, and then be on the lookout for Tactical Thursdays tomorrow with Mr. Wetmore. And then Friday Fuel with Johnny. And then we got Saturday morning cartoons with Alex and Sawyer. So that one's going to be really cool. Sawyer, Alex's 10-year-old, is interviewing Cody Askins this Saturday morning. So definitely be sure to tune into that. But here we are on our weekly Winning on Wednesday call. Thank you so much to everybody that's popping in here. Again, we've got an action-packed show for you guys. I'm super excited. And so with that, again, years of experience, 10 plus years, maybe I believe even actually 15 plus years of experience within the life and health side, again, financial side of things, working within banks, really just growing organizations from the ground up to I mean, guys, the numbers he's going to drop on here, and I'll let him talk about the numbers. So without that being said, or without further ado, put in the comments, put a nice little hand clap, any type of emoji for me for my new good friend, Mr. Heath Boeke. What's going on, sir?
No, thanks a lot for having me this morning, man. This is my very first ever podcast, and I'm excited to be on here. So I appreciate the invite.
He had the backwards hat on. He was geared for the show. There it is. He was geared for the show with Joe. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time. And just real quick, just kind of let us know, who is Heath, kind of where do you come from, and then we'll kind of just what you're kind of doing now. Quick little 30,000-foot overview, and then we'll get into it.
You bet. So I'm in Iowa, born and raised. I grew up small town in Iowa, Hubbard, Iowa. We were like a town of 800 people, and kind of a farm community. My grandpa and my dad and my uncle owned a Case IH dealership, and just kind of grew up there, and just always kind of knew growing up that wasn't really where I wanted to be my whole life. And so I ended up going to college, played baseball and golf in college, and then actually got my architecture degree, and was doing some architectural stuff, helping design sports facilities and things like that in the Des Moines, Iowa area. And then from there, just kind of realized it wasn't really my jam. And so went back to school, went back to the University of Iowa, got a degree, a minor in business with an entrepreneurship certificate. And here I am. I started in the financial services industry almost immediately after I graduated Iowa in 2007. Helped my good friend and high school friend start a Mass Mutual agency over in the Iowa City area. And so I grew up cutting my teeth on slinging life insurance, whole life, fixed annuities, stuff like that. And then when I ended up getting my Series 6 and 63 and started doing some more financial planning and holistic stuff, and got recruited by Transamerica to run an office for them in Coralville, Iowa, which is right next to Iowa City, basically the same town. And then from there, worked for those guys 2.5 years, and got recruited away by the state's largest financial institution for the growth and stuff that I'd done for the other companies, to help them grow their insurance department. And that's where I landed the last 5.5 years before I decided to spin off and start my own consulting firm. So that's
love it.
Where we're at. Yeah.
I got it. This is, I mean, to me, it's, now granted, I'm the weirdo. I've been wanting to be in insurance since I was in second grade, right? But I love hearing people's stories about like what led them to insurance, right? It's like you had a degree in architecture and you were helping build sports facilities, and now you're 15 plus years in the financial services and life and health industry, right? Which is just crazy to me. I love hearing those stories and just how you get there. So let's kind of start there. And I've been asking this question, and I think I told you I was going to ask you this.
Yep.
What was your first job? I like to hear what was your first ever job. Not to date you or anything, not to go too far back, but what was the first job?
So when I was a little kid, I was out to my dad's shop a lot, right? And they've got machinery, oil, dirt, corn and beans all over the place on the floors and stuff. And it's just not safe for those mechanics to be working it with heavy equipment. And so my dad and my uncle paid me $3 an hour on the weekends to sweep floor.
Come on.
So grinding it out one sweep at a time for $3 an hour. That was my very first job. Yep.
Wow. Our guest last week, Brian with Clarity Insurance, Brian Katai, he literally, what was his first job? Was sweeping freaking floors, man. I love that. Hey, two weeks in a row. I'm gonna keep asking that question. I love the answers to that, man.
Yep.
Well, so I guess obviously you're doing everything that what kind of really even steered you in the direction towards Mass Mutual? Kind of enlighten us on that, right? Because again, you went to school, and I think, for me, it was, I went to school and I ended up I dropped out of college to do insurance full time. But the whole reason that, you went to college and you did all that was just that was just what I was supposed to do. Right. And I think a lot of us have lived that life where, hey, this is just what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go get your degree. Then with your degree, you get your good job.
Right.
What kind of led you, right after graduation to Mass Mutual and into insurance? What was that?
So I think a lot of times what leads a lot of folks to being their own boss and jumping into the life insurance realm or being a financial advisor is you get to a point to where you're putting in a lot of work and working for the man, right? And at some point in time, you're at home or wherever you're at, you're talking to your buddies, and you got to just tell yourself, I'm worth more than this right now, right? I'm worth more than this. Managing. So I worked at Shields while I was going to college at Iowa. I was the baseball manager, the water sports manager, worked in the archery department for a little while. And I just kept telling myself, like, man, for what I'm doing, for what I'm getting paid, like, I feel like I'm worth more than this, right? And so when my friend called, I I was like, yeah, man, I'm on board. I'm on board. And going from a, $35,000 job, which isn't, that all great.
Ideal.
Not making a lot of money is not
Right.
that big of a difference, but from going from 35 to 100 or a couple 100,000 a year is a big difference, right? And so for me, it was kind of worth it. I just decided to bet on myself. And I think for those folks that are willing to do that, it's a life changer, really.
Yeah.
So, and granted, I did go and start working for the largest financial institution in the state, which I was really lucky and very humble to be able to work for those guys. They taught me a lot. And that's really over the last 5 years where I got a lot of my experience for what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point in time, you just got to tell yourself, hey, if you're working a 9-to-5 job and making $16 an hour, man, you can go drive truck and make 60 grand a year and sit on your ass. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's one of those things to where you just, you got to tell yourself, man, I'm worth more than what I'm making right now.
Right. Right. I love that. Take a gamble on yourself, right? I mean, go all in, right? And I think that's the other part too. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to part-time it, right? Or like, and I think I've seen a lot more as I've started more to get into the life and health side of things, and really even on the property and casualty side, even though people say they're full-time, they're working part-time, right? And so I love that you said that, because when you go all in, you're jumping in, man. Like it isn't just kind of dipping your toes in the water, man. Like you're going head first. Let's get after it. I'm really going to bet on myself. So let's kind of go there before we get to, obviously you've done some amazing things with Mass Mutual, and that's what kind of propelled you into the largest financial institution in the state, which is, we'll get there and we'll talk through some of those numbers.
Yeah.
What are some things that you could give to really newer agents, veterans, just really life insurance agents, just in general? What were 2 to 3 things that you think were critical to your success at Mass Mutual, and how you were able to grow that in a fairly short period of time?
Yeah, I would say obviously self-belief, right, has got to be number one. You got to have conviction in what you're doing. You got to have belief in the stuff that you're selling, right? Because when you're selling life insurance, you are selling a need, but it's not like home and auto where people actually have to have it, right?
Right.
And so you just got to have conviction and belief that you're the best person to do the job for the person that you're in front of, right? And then align yourself with a great carrier and a great company who's got the right training. Right. So for me at that point in time, it was between Northwestern Mutual and Mass Mutual. Not to like plug companies on here, right? But you should get some sponsor dollars. But
come on, Northwestern.
For me at the time, Northwestern Mutual and Mass Mutual have the best training out there for young agents. So align yourself when you're new in the business with a company that is going to provide you the best training and not maybe the best product, but a very good product that you can sell. And then down the road, give yourself the experience, and then you can go out and be an independent somewhere and make your money or do whatever you need to do. But go somewhere where the training is going to be great, because you can have all the talent in the world. But man, if you're new to the industry and you don't get the right training, it can be really hard to get off on the right foot.
Right. Well, and so let's talk about that. Let's go a little bit deeper on that, because I referenced Brian. So Brian was on last week. And so he started with New York Life is where he started. And he said the exact same thing. He goes, dude, unparalleled. Like, I really don't think I've ever had better training than I did through New York Life. He accredits a lot to that. And his biggest thing was really not necessarily the things there, but it was like the accountability piece of it, right? Mm-hmm. To where, there's something else to it, right? Versus just, hey, here's some modules, here, go train, right? Make some calls, whatever that is. But it's what was that for you with Mass Mutual? What maybe is there anything that really kind of stood out that was like, man, this is what made this training so legit, we'll call it?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties back to the very first conversation I had with Cyrus's team. I think Cyrus has been on the podcast too and had a good podcast. You talk about intentionality, right? And being intentional with your day and what you're trying to accomplish and get done and hitting those little goals. We were big on the 10-3-1, that we literally called it the shoebox plan. To where you would go and you would have like your 1-card system, and you would go call someone and you'd ask them, and you'd have a filer in there with the alphabet, and you'd call them up and say, hey, can I get on your calendar next week? And if they said no, you said, okay, how about I follow up in 6 months? And you'd write on the card, and you put it in the back of the shoebox underneath their name, and you put in your calendar to call them 6 months later. It just the training was very unique, but I think one of the best things that I got training wise from Mass Mutual is, man, we studied our competition like crazy, almost more than we knew our own product.
I like
because
that.
if you know your competition, right, like it's almost a layup.
Right.
Right.
Dang.
And
That's good.
so that's one of the main things that I focused a lot on too at Green State at the last career that I had there was our kids, not our kids, our agents. They knew their competition.
Sometimes they feel like your kids, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Knock on wood.
We were hiring, we were hiring in some really good talent when I left, and they were a ton of fun. And it's one of those things to where if you know the competition, it makes your job easier, right?
Right.
And so I think knowing your competition is key. If you don't know your competition, get to know your competition, because our sales jump big time when someone will come to say I have State Farm or I have Allstate, or not to pick on anyone on here that might be with State Farm or Allstate, but we know certain things that they like to do that we can come back and say, hey, look, I can get you the same coverage for $1,000 deductible instead of a 1%, right? So I'm automatically going to save you $2,500 at the time of a loss, right? Or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And so just knowing your competition was huge, and then being intentional about your day. Being your own boss can be kind of tough, right? It's another level of accountability.
Yep.
Right.
I think with intentionality, especially with your clients too, right? I think that it goes back to caring. Right. Because like when you're being intentional, it's because you care. Right. And it's not because I care about the dollar sign. Right. There's differences, I think, nuances within that. But I think, anybody, and I've definitely found this, and really as Redwood has grown and as we've been able to do what we've done, and really it's crazy. We're coming up on 5 years in March that we start. But it's crazy to think back to, like, man, when we started Scratch, I was like, we had to be so intentional, because if we weren't, I mean, we weren't going to make it. We weren't going to be able to pay rent, right? It was, hey, I did the 1, 2, 3. And I think people have heard me talk about it, where we did 100, and it was every single one of us here in the office. It was, hey, you do 100 dials a day, 2 hours talk time, 3 policies sold, 2 out of the 3 are done every single day before you leave. Right. And so you want to talk about intentionality and like having to do that every single day, but it was because I cared about what was actually happening back here. Was, hey, I wanted to keep the lights on. I really believed in the mission, because we did go all in, right? Obviously, everybody knows me and Pop started the agency together. I mean, he was making 6-figure salary, corporate job, company car, company phone, savings, bonuses every year, all that good stuff. And it was, man, we scrapped that, right? And we're like, we really believe in this. And I think, that kind of goes back to my original point, was when you're intentional, it's because you care about something that's so much bigger than what that day to day is, right?
100%. I agree with that.
So let's real quick. Maggie's on here. Hey, Maggie, how are you? She actually asked another member what he is doing to prospect. Do you have maybe anything that when you were either on the phone or out in the field, or what you were doing, some maybe, tips or tricks on, hey, this is what I did to prospect?
For me, it was fun, because I like being out and I like being in front of people, and I like going golfing and going to basketball and football games and stuff like that. And so I would say prospect in the arenas to where you're most comfortable, right? And serve those people. Don't try and be someone you're not and serve a clientele that you're not going to have a lot of rapport with. Try and be in a circle of clientele that you're going to be able to just automatically connect with, whether it's so for us, like the Hawkeye, the University of Iowa, like club is called the I Club. Go to the I Club, get to know people, or go to the Rotary, go to the Ambassadors Club for the city council and stuff like that. Try and get into a circle of people that have like hobbies or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Don't try and go be someone you're not, because then the conversation is very awkward, and you're trying to serve a client base that you might not have a lot in common with. And that's really hard to be successful doing it that way.
Right. And I don't think you just don't necessarily resonate, right? There's just not that connection there. Right.
Correct.
So I guess, okay, so that's great. And I love that, because and you guys are hearing this. It's such a common theme. It's like, hey, just get out there, get in the room, right? Go surround yourself with people that are like-minded, right? That to where, again, they are your, Sandra Gephardt teaches on this. Really, who is your client, your ideal client avatar? And I think a lot of people, especially like me on the P&C side, everybody says mortgage brokers and real estate agents. And I'm like, okay, well, crunch those numbers. How much business have you closed from the mortgage broker or the real estate agent? And it's like, Oh shit, like only like 5 deals. And it's like,
Right.
so are they really your ideal client avatar, right? Or it's like, hey, but look, but I'm closing this much more over here, and you just hadn't, they weren't as intentional as they should have been over here with said client, right?
I would
Um,
challenge folks to keep track of that. And
yeah,
I don't know what everybody's pipeline looks like, but I used to have a pipeline to where every lead source was colored. And at the end of the month, I would go through and be like, oh, wow, I got like 15 leads from this person and closed like 14 of them. I need to take that person golfing or out to lunch or out to dinner or whatever it might, go to a happy hour.
right.
Um, and so you might be surprised if you start really honing in and being intentional about getting those numbers right and tracking where those sources and leads are coming from. To your point, you might find out that what you might think is the best referral source might only be getting you, a handful of what's really coming in throughout the month.
Right, right. And how much time are you spending on that where you could be reallocating that time to somebody who is actually going to be
Right.
driving you more better business, right?
Yep.
Okay, so and we just brought up numbers, and I wanted to see if you'd be down to share some numbers. So Mass Mutual, but Green State was after Green
Mass.
State isn't after Mass, is it? Or it is?
It is, yeah. So
Okay.
Mass Mutual is where I cut my teeth.
Okay.
Mass
Okay.
Mutual is where I literally had to hunt to survive, right?
Okay. So then
100% commission, for the first 3 years, and then got my Series 6 and 63 after like 2.5 years because I was sending a lot of financial services like Roth IRAs and annuities and stuff to friends because I wasn't licensed. And so then I finally got licensed after they convinced me it was in my best interest, which obviously it was. But and so I did that for an additional 3.5. God, I was there for almost 7 years, and then 2.5 at Transamerica, and then 5 at Green State. So you were pretty close when you said 10 plus. It's right at like 12 or I think 12 or so.
Okay.
But I was the rookie of the year there at Mass Mutual. I actually got rookie of the year twice. Which is
red shirted.
Yeah. So what happens is if you come in like in the middle of the year and you outperform all the people that came in at the beginning of the year, you can still qualify for like rookie of the year. And then I won it again the next year
For the full year.
For the full year. So that was a lot of fun. Wrote some nice like $40, $50, $60,000 annual premiums with whole life and planning that way. Basically, income planning for down the road. And if you ever want to do like an income planning session, that stuff like lights my fire, man. I love doing that stuff. So
Tony, you hear that? Merwin, you still watching? Tuesday training.
How to position those alternative assets for income later and frees up your financial plan and your withdrawals. It makes so much sense. So everybody should do it. And so then from there, I went to Transamerica, was second in my very first year. I knew nothing about their product and ended up being second in life insurance in our agency. And then from there, just got recruited away from Green State. And that's kind of where the fun it was all fun, but man, that's where the fun really kind of started to happen.
How much did you grow Green State? Where were they at when you got there, and then where were they at when you just? And you just recently split off to start your own consulting
October
firm, right?
18th is when I split off to start my own consulting firm. Yep. And so when I got there, they were a little over 12.5 million in premium, and when I left, they were over 40 in 5 years. So
hear that?
A lot, and all but a couple million of that was 100% organic growth, which is really cool. And so we grew, a little over 105% over 5 years, and averaged roughly over the last 4 years, averaged almost 30% organic growth each year, which was just crazy. We started off first year premium right in about 2.8. And when I left in August, they were on pace to do 7.2 million in first year.
Wow. So break that down. How are you growing 30% year over year organically? I'm a big organic guy. I mean, literally, we're sitting in a Facebook group that I've built organically. And everybody knows me.
My phone is going off, and I forgot to shut it off. So let me silence this thing.
You're good. You're good.
So, it was really coming in and taking a look at what their process looked like. Right. And what are all the salespeople doing? What are all the service people doing? And what is possible with what we have? Mm-hmm. That firm, that financial institution is very good at running very lean. Everybody there is bought in, right? They do a really good job, but they do a really good job with explaining the why behind we have to run lean. right? So you have people doing 3 and 4 times the work as someone else at another financial institution, but they know it's for the good of the cause, right? And so I wasn't able to hire to create more sales. And so what I had to do was figure out a way to get the people that I do have in sales sell more.
Okay.
And so what we ended up doing is I did like a 2.5 month assessment. We ended up seeing that a lot of the salespeople were doing some service work, like issuing their own policies, sending out applications, making policy changes, doing rewrites. And then the service team was still doing a small amount of like sales, right? And I was like, oh, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I literally had our operations manager at the time and another person that had been there for a while sit down with me, and we literally just went up on a whiteboard and said, all right, what does sales actually need to be doing
So good
to make this work, right? And we wrote it up on the thing, and we wrote like, okay, what should service and what can service be responsible for throughout the process, right? And so there's literally like no overlap.
Yeah.
And so we separated all the sales activities and all the service activities from each department, and we had to increase communication, right? And so communication was huge. That one took a little bit of time. I'm not going to tell you that doing this right away was the easiest thing I've ever done, because there was a ton of pushback. But at the end of the day, everybody ended up buying in, and we grew 33%. I got there in July of 2015, and we grew 2017. We grew 33% over the last half of the year when we only had 1% growth the first 6 months.
Wow. So it took the time to build up. Well, so then this is perfect, because I think a lot of agents, and I know just agents in general, feel this, right? And I've been super blessed and fortunate to see some very large operations, but they talk about what was that pivotal moment when they said, man, I'm going to do this, but the pushback that they got from it. What are some things, as somebody who maybe is in a leadership role, or somebody who's, running an agency or a division or whatever that's watching, what are maybe some ways that you were able to overcome that pushback? Was it, hey, y'all just look at the numbers, or was it, hey, let's have a conversation? Like, what was it that really kind of overcame that pushback?
Yeah, you bet. To be honest with you, I failed at it big time right away, because I was super cocky when I came in. I'm running the ship. I have all the answers, right? Like, we're going to do it my way. The thing that changed the tide was when I realized that, hey, if I explain the why before I actually implement this stuff, a lot more people are willing to jump on board.
Yeah.
And so I read Simon Sinek's book and listened to his podcast. Guy's a genius. I think he does a really good job. But once I started explaining the why behind the changes, then you get a lot more buy-in, right? Yeah. And you always have to let them know there's a chart out there. I don't know if it's like the chart of latency's potential. I'm probably screwing it up, but there's always going to be some slowdown when you make an immediate change before it starts getting better, right? And so you have to just preface that to the team and say, hey, look, it's probably not going to go well for the first 2 or 3 months, but we're going to give this 6 months. And after 6 months, we'll reassess where we're at, right? Because it's really tough for the team to go through a lot of the struggles because everything's new to them.
Right.
And you got to give them time to kind of do it for an amount of time to where it's not new anymore. And they found their rhythm and their groove. And so you just got to be forward about that and say, hey, it's probably going to be a little rocky for the first 2 or 3 months, but we need to stick with it because I really believe that this is the best thing for the team. And you can say, hey, I'm going to take ownership if it's not, right? Right. I'm going to take the ownership.
That's the hard part, right?
If it's not working, it's my fault, but I need you guys to do this. And if it doesn't work, I will take the blame. Right. And that's one thing that I learned about being a leader is, at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you have your team's back, or are you in it just to be the person holding the title at the top? Right.
Man, it's good. So, yep. That's what, there's an image out there. Merwin, I believe, has actually brought it up on one of his presentations before, where it's like a leader is like, it's the person that's sitting up like on the like on the carriage almost, and everybody's pulling it, right? And then
Yeah.
it's like, but then it's like the actual leader who's actually in front that's helping them pull it, right? Instead of
Right.
just sitting up there. So I love that you said that. I wanted to backtrack too, because this was very, very crucial for Redwood as well, because when we first started, we didn't have, honestly, we didn't have the know-how, and like what you said, like, dude, we did not know like how to do it, right? It was, hey, we got the direct appointments, and then it was like, best of luck to you, right? And so, but when we first started, we all had to do our own sales and service. So when we finally got to the point of where, hey, like we can actually we can pay somebody a salary to do all the service. One
Right.
of the hardest things, which, and again, I love that you said, because we did the exact same thing, y'all, and anybody listening, I really encourage you to do this. It was actually defining what is service, or, hey, if it gets to this point, right now, what is it, right? And we had to do like a whole diagram. Well, hey, if it's this, then it's still sales, right? But then as soon as it gets here, man, you get that thing off your plate and it goes to service, right? And really defining like what that was so crucial for us, because it was the same thing. I'm actually having it with my guy, Austin, right now. He's the only salesperson I ever know that actually wants it, which it goes back to the intentionality and actually caring. So I love that part about his heart, but it's like, yo, dude, pass that to freaking Hanky. That's service, my man.
Right.
But he literally, he's like, what I want to do, like, he wants to do that for the client, which I love that. But it was really, I mean, in order to, and I think, and that's part of how you grow. You have to determine what that is, right? And just really iron out that workflow and then stick to it. And then if it doesn't work, guess what? You can come back to the whiteboard, to the drawing board, and let's try maybe going this route. You know what I'm saying? So
100%. A perfect example would be, I took issuing policies off my service team's hands. So one of the hardest things, and this is where the communication piece comes into play, and utilizing your CRM to its max capacity, right? I did not allow them to issue their policies anymore, because they could be smiling and dialing or doing another quote during that amount of time. And sometimes it can take a decent amount of time to issue a policy, depending on, if there's premium change that wasn't expected, things like that. And so they would be responsible for, as soon as there's a couple things we implemented. As soon as the agent got the go ahead, right? They like the quotes accepted, they're ready to rock and roll. That agent did like a follow-up and said, great, I just need his payment information, blah, blah, blah. Then we can get started. Where are your loans at? All that good stuff. And then they would set a suspense at some point in time in the future to their teammate that they needed to issue that policy on that day that suspense comes up. And so there's a lot of like blind trust happening to start. And I think that was the hardest thing that they had to get over. Because if you're relying on
my money is now,
right. If you're relying on your policies to get issued, and that's how you get paid by someone else, like, that's on your mind a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they found out that, dude, I can do 8 more quotes this week and close 6 more policies, which is, like $500 or $1,000 in commission. Like, I like that part better now. I'm okay with giving up, issuing those other policies, right? And so I think the communication piece and to the point I just mentioned, were huge stepping stones in helping our agency grow. Yeah,
that's good, man. So then so we've been kind of talking about like within the business and kind of how you've been able to go through, multiple organizations, rookie of the year twice. I love that stat. It's like, yeah, I was rookie of the year twice, baby. But what were things that you could recommend to an agent that you were personally doing for self-growth, right? And so, because obviously as you're doing that, now I'm making more money, I'm running an entire division versus going out in the field and selling policies on my own pen. What were things that you were doing for yourself, or what you would recommend to agents to put some more emphasis on, because it was a game changer for you and how you were able to build out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll hit on 2 points. So I will say, and one is a failure. I will say that I didn't necessarily focus on a bunch of accolades within the insurance industry, which maybe I should have done more. Like, I took an agency management CIC course one time, and that was the only thing I did as far as like CIC stuff goes, right? However, that stuff is super important, and if I ever get back into that or ever own or run an agency again, I'll probably look at getting and accomplishing and getting my CIC certificate. And so I didn't do a bunch of that, but it is important. But man, I love winning and hearing stories about winning. And I think the main thing to be successful is you got to keep yourself positive. Because in a sales position, man, there's a lot of negative thoughts that run through your mind throughout the day, right? And so to listen to some podcasts, to listen and expand your mind and grow mentally with some books and things like that are huge parts of my weekly activity. I mean, my goal last year was to listen to a book a month. Like I've got big time like ADHD, man. I can't sit down and like read a book. Like it just doesn't work for me. I can't sit down and read a book, but I'll tell you what, like in a car or working out or mowing the lawn or whatever, I can listen to a book. And I will make this recommendation. If you are in or wanting to get into leadership, read books because it works, right?
Yep.
And the number one book that I have ever read on leadership is called The Motive.
Okay.
And it is a fantastic book. It literally changed my trajectory in leadership overnight, right? Wow. It is so good. So I would recommend that book to anybody on this podcast that is in leadership, The Motive. I believe it's either by John Gordon or Patrick Lencioni.
Okay.
I don't know off the top.
I'll look it up and put it in the comments, y'all, so you guys can see it.
It's a game changer of a leadership book. It's just fantastic. It's my all-time favorite. But I challenged myself to read a book a month, and I actually ended up reading or listening to 13 books last year. And awesome. I would contribute a lot of that to my personal growth last year. And it just keeps you fresh, right? Because a lot of times you hear a lot what's going on inside of your agency, right? And you get the perspective of what it's like to be like there, but to have that outside perspective and hear it from someone else makes a big difference. So.
Man, that's literally what I was going to say was perspective.
Yep.
Having the perspective and sometimes, so I talk about House of Dreams all the time because it's what we founded our agency on, but we talk about sometimes it is just that, like what you just said, it was one book that freaking, changed so much, right? And we talk like, hey, it's the one book, it's the one person, it's that one conversation, right? It's that one event that you go to. And that's what I love. Well, let's go back to where we first started, y'all, just being intentional and getting in the room, right? And getting in the room doesn't mean, hey, now I do encourage live in-person events, but it's more of just showing up, right? Really buying in, going all in on yourself. And I think a lot of the times the perspective that we exercise is Tony Merwin talks about this a lot too, is like, he's like, man, when I get kind of caught up, it's because I'm like the hood of his car's open, right? But he's sitting there with his head so freaking far into the freaking hood, right? He can't find what's wrong with it. And it's like, but then as soon as he backs up and really looks at the bigger picture, he's like, oh shoot, I just needed to get my head out of the hood to actually see how to fix this thing, right? So
there's a really nice saying out there that to be a true professional and a great business person, you need to not only be able to work in your business, but also on your business. And they're two completely separate things, right? So don't just focus on bringing in sales, focus on bettering yourself, and then that'll help you bring in more sales, right? So work on your business just as hard as you work in your business.
Love it. I love it. So then so I kind of want to take the kind of last bit of the call. We still got plenty of time here. So I have Mass Mutual, Transamerica real quick, right? And then obviously with Green State, and then now, hey, as of October, literally like you're a month into this thing. Why? Like what caused hey, you know what? I'm going to go start my own consulting thing and just kind of walk us through that. And then really kind of some of I know like the why, but really the reason and kind of the goal of doing, like, what are the goals of going out and now starting your own business, your own agency or consulting firm?
Absolutely. So as I just previously mentioned, like I love winning, but what I love even more is like helping other people win. Right. And throughout my time at Green State, there was a lot of opportunity to help younger agents grow. Even some senior people there, came up to me and thanked me when I left and said, hey, look, I would definitely not be where I'm at if it wasn't for you. And they were at the agency before I got there. And so for them to say that to me, it means a lot, right? And I'm still really good friends with all those folks. But to me, it's about, if I'm at Green State, I can really only impact Green State. But if I can provide a service and a winning and a win for multiple people, working for them 10 to 20 hours a month or whatever it might be. I mean, basically they're getting a CEO or executive style management or processes for, a quarter of the cost of a regular CEO. And I can bring that 5 years of experience and implement it in 6 months. You know what I mean? That type of thing.
Yep.
And so I did a lot of research throughout the credit union industry, actually. And a lot of credit unions struggle with having successful insurance agencies just because there's not a ton of synergy between buy-in at the credit union level and helping the agency grow, right? Like some of them just don't want to cross-contaminate data. You know what I mean? And because of restrictions or whatever it might be, but there's ways that you can actually accomplish that and make it happen. And so to be able to go and speak to those folks, other institutions, or maybe even some real estate firms that, hey, look, you got data is money right now in this world. If you haven't figured out that data is money, then, you need to read up because
change your perspective, guys, because it is the new currency.
It is. Data is money. And you've got real estate firms, accounting firms that have all this data and help all these people. And they just don't realize it. And so you can go in and show them a pro forma. And so not only am I helping folks with their processes and the executive style leadership and sales coaching and language and stuff like that, but I'm also going to these other firms that don't even have insurance and may not have even thought about it and saying, hey, look, let's turn your data into revenue for you. Right. And I can do it at a very inexpensive startup cost, like hardly anything. You know what I mean? And so that to me was the ability to help multiple people get wins all at the same time.
Okay.
Right. And for me, I just mentioned it, got a little ADHD, working on multiple things at one time for me.
It's perfect.
It's perfect because I never get bored. You know what I mean?
I love it.
So it's an adventure, it's always scary. It brought me back to the very first time when I was at Mass Mutual, and every now and then you have struggles, right? I was up at 2 a.m. one time at Mass Mutual trying to figure out where my next lead is coming from. I had a payment to make and I didn't have any money, and all that stuff. And you're just thinking to yourself, what do I got to do today to make this the best day I've ever had?
Right.
And so I'm kind of going through that again. So it's kind of like I wake up, okay, what's my game plan and my business plan just for today? You know what I mean? So it's new, it's fresh, it's fun for me. It's scary. It's definitely scary, but it's also very exciting.
So when you say consultation though, and everything that you're kind of like, can you break that down a little bit as, hey, like this is what I'm doing when I go into like an organization or a business to help them grow, or to like, what necessarily does it all entail? Again, hey, maybe there is somebody listening to this, watching this, that man, I like what this guy's, I understand what he's putting down, and maybe it would make sense. There's some synergy there for them to reach out. And
what I normally do is it's kind of a 3-phase process, right? So phase 1 is really just kind of coming in and sitting down and getting to know your agency a little bit, right? It's doing some observing, looking at your processes and systems, looking at the way you write new business. What's the workflow look like to make sure it's efficient, right? And then from there, I can actually take that back, make some recommendations, and then phase 3 is obviously the recommendations is phase 2, and then obviously implementation is phase 3. And then an additional service that I like to provide is, making sure people know whether or not they're winning, right? And so we were a nation's best practice agency. I took us from kind of like a lackluster, no offense to anybody that was there when I got there, but I took that agency from kind of a lackluster, low-performing agency to a nation's best practice agency in 18 months because I wanted to know whether the credit union thought I was winning or not. I wanted to know whether I was winning,
Right.
And so I went and talked to Reagan Consulting, and I said, hey, look, I need your help. I need to know whether or not my agency's winning because I'm going to have to go talk to the board of directors and give a presentation on what we've done this year. Right. And I need some good stuff to be able to take to them and say, hey, look, we're not only are winning, but we're like top of class in like several categories. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's another service that I would do for a monthly fee, right? Is take a look at your financials, put together those metrics for you on a monthly basis and say, hey, look, you're doing a great job. Your revenue category is X. And for your revenue category, your organic growth, sales velocity, your profitability, and your, EBITDA margin or your profit margin is excellent, right? Or I can come in and say, hey, look, your organic growth is really good, but your profit margin's not so great. But if you're in a growing mode, you might not need to be concerned about that, because a lot of times when you're growing, you're spending a little more money, therefore your profit's a little bit lower, right?
Yep.
So I can do that on an
Feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in growth, and that was one of my main concerns. I learned a lot real fast. One of my main concerns when I was doing that is our sales velocity and our organic growth was over 30%. And our rule, the profitability score on the best practice assessment is called the rule of 20. It's like your organic growth plus like half of your pro forma EBITDA, right?
Yep. Okay.
And that was pretty good, but then it went to like our EBITDA profit margin was like 24%, right? But that was because I was hiring on agents at a really fast clip that hadn't done any production yet. And that's explainable, right? And so having those metrics to put in front of like a board of directors, or even on a monthly basis to give to your agents and say, hey guys, like we need to step it up this last quarter. This last quarter's been kind of okay, but not great. So let's really focus on X to make sure that we're moving the needle in this specific area.
Right. That's good. Yeah. That's good. And I think, that just goes back to, y'all, like it goes back to the intentionality piece. I think that's what I'm going to name the show when we get it on YouTube and Spotify and stuff, because you need to be intentional to know those numbers.
Right.
How many of us know those numbers? Do we know that, hey, maybe I am a little bit less profitable because I am growing, right? Or maybe I'm less profitable, but I'm not growing, and like why, right? And so just getting into really the weeds. And I want to kind of take the last like minute of this, because all of that, you're not doing this from an Excel sheet, right? I mean, you might have a place for an Excel sheet, right? But like you need systems and infrastructure in place to know these numbers, right? There's one thing just to, hey, I'm writing it down on a pen and paper, right? And I'm sorry, y'all, but I do know some of you are not using a CRM or an agency management system. I don't care whether you're life or health, PNC, whatever it is. Like, if you're not using a system, like that's where I would buckle down, and whatever you need to cut over here to be able to spend over here to get something like that in place. And again, I'm not saying I'm perfect, because we're now going through another tech overhaul. We've gone through, we have changed tech stacks like 3 times in the past 3.5 years. So I'm not saying we're perfect, but we know the value behind it, right? Because it's so important to have that in place. And I'm sure for you, as somebody who's coming into like, you go in and then it's like, dude, you ain't got a CRM, like you don't have anything. That's like probably the first step. Am I wrong?
It totally would be. I mean, if you don't know your data, then you're not literally running a business if you don't know your data, right? I would be irate. I kicked people out of sales meetings because they didn't know their weekly numbers. I was like, get out of here. If you don't know your numbers and you're not going to hold yourself accountable to coming to the meeting prepared, go back to your desk and get to work. Right.
That's good.
I would kick people out. And I think I did that in like my first or second week at Green State, when these guys were like, who is this guy? And I said, if you're not going to know your numbers and come to this meeting, like just don't be here.
Right.
Right. Because I'm going to hold you.
What's the point of being there? Yeah.
Right. What's the point of being here if you're not going to keep track of your numbers? When you're not going to keep track of your numbers, you're probably going to fail, and I'm probably going to get rid of you anyway.
That's good.
So, yeah.
That's good, man. Well, dude, thank you for.
I could talk about this all day long, but you should be able to ask any salesperson, any good salesperson, where they're at throughout the month, and they're going to tell you within a couple $1,000s of premium or a couple $100 in commission on where they're at, because they know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's freaking good, man. And it all comes back to just going all in on yourself and being intentional, right? But then also, I love this, and this is my heart. Anybody that's been to SWAT, I'm a diehard yellow. Man, it's just being positive, man, and just knowing, hey, I'm going to try and be the best version of myself today. And you stack enough of those days together, then it turns into 6 months, then it turns into a year, then it turns into, it's like, oh shoot, dude, it's like you blink and it's like, dang, I did that for 7 years, right? It's like, oh shit, I've actually been doing this for a while.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. If anybody wants any recommendations, send them to Joe. I can get you any type of recommendations you want for really good books. Like I said, over the last 18 months, I've read listened. I won't lie and say I listened to almost 20 books in the last 18 months. So I got a ton of recommendations if anybody's looking for some good content. So.
That's good. And then take just 20 seconds. Hey, if people, again, Heath Boeke, guys, he's here on the show with us, winning on Wednesday. 20 seconds. How can they reach out to you if they want to maybe talk some shop? What's the best way to reach out?
My email is heath@thesgpteam.com.
Okay.
Right.
And we'll drop that in the comments for y'all too.
Yep. And then hold on. My my phone number, I just have my cell. It's 515-689-3943. Just shoot me a quick text with all the spam that we're getting right now via phone calls.
Text me.
Just shoot me a quick text and say, hey, Heath, really enjoyed your time on the podcast today. Would love to chat or whatever it might be. We'll be more than happy to help you guys out. I was going to share my one win. Can I share my one win?
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Yeah, absolutely. I was supposed to lead with that. My bad.
So we all, and I should have done that to start, but we all kind of have a persona or a thought about ourselves, right? And so my one win this week was I finally updated my LinkedIn and got rid of president at Green State Insurance to founder and CEO of Strategic Growth Partners Consulting. And for me, it was a hard one because a lot of times, I had to really think about this, right? We think about identity, and this might hit home for some of you. We think about what our identity is, and we a lot of times relate our work title to who we are. And so I actually had to call up a really good friend of mine, Jordan Montgomery, who's probably one of the best motivational speakers in the entire country. I'll just give him a plug. Great dear friend of mine, lives here in the same area that I live in. And I literally had to basically ask him for permission. I'm like, you got to tell me I can give myself permission to do this. He goes, dude, that's not who you are. You're a great father. You're a loving friend. You're all these other things besides like that title. So just change it. Right. And so that was my one win this week. Like, the title of your job does not define the real person who you are. The real person you are is, family, friends, faith, whatever it might be. Right. So, but that's my win for the week.
Right on, bro. Way to close us out. That's powerful, man. I love that the title does not define you, right? And hey, a title is just a title, right? And you talked about persona, and like we talk about that with just our sailboat of like your persona is what it is, the sailboat, right? It's the mast. It's what everybody sees above the water, right? But really that's just your title. Right. What really matters is what's below the water, which is your character. Right. It's what nobody sees. Right. But it's who you are. Right. Chris is over here saying he loves it. Man. Yeah, dude. Thank you for sharing that. I apologize. I'm glad you circled back around to share your win, because that was a great way to.
I wanted to get that out because I thought it might hit home with a few folks. So yeah,
it's good. That's good. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time, Heath. I really appreciate it, y'all. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. It'll be out on Spotify and YouTube here in the next month or so. Make sure and go check out our YouTube, Spotify. Go give us a like, subscribe. I've been doing a lot of updates on the actual channel that itself. So go check it out. Again, it's the Insurance Syndicate. Would love any feedback too. If you guys, hey man, that looks like garbage, or hey, it looks pretty clean, because I have been spending a lot of time on it. I'm not a YouTube pro. It's not like my full-time job, but I'm trying. Best version of myself, right? So again, Heath, really appreciate it. Syndicate members, hey, it's Wednesday. It's peak of the week, right? So the week ain't over. Let's keep crushing it. Hey, be intentional. Be bought in, know your numbers, right? And don't show up to that sales meeting without your freaking numbers. Otherwise, we're booting you. I love it, man.
All right, Joe, all right. Let me know. I think you have my email, but if you want to just share that in the chat for everybody, that'd be awesome.
I'll drop it. Awesome.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Syndicate members. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a great week.